Okay, now we're looking at part 3 in our text, where we actually look at organizations from the group and organizational level. So we're going to have group and team development, power and conflict, politics, leadership. We'll be talking about that in this particular section. But in this chapter, we're actually going to focus on group and team behavior, chapter 8. The learning objectives for this chapter are to, again, we always start with defining what a group is and what a team is, what's the difference between groups and teams, why people form groups and teams, different stages of group development, and factors for how we can build effective teams in our organizations. Groups and teams, it's defined as 2 or more employees who interact with each other in a manner that the behavior or performance of a member is influenced by the behavior and the performance of other members. So we have a dynamics going on when we look at group and team behavior. When we look at types of groups, there's formal groups that are created for specific purposes by the organization. There's also informal groups where they might be around some sort of a task or some kind of a project that might be going on informally. Informal groups come out of individual efforts. They develop around common interests, friendships, and they're more organic. They're not deliberately designed. Lots of informal groups tend to be out of friendship or personal influence. People form groups because they want to satisfy needs. They might do it because it might be more economical for people to work together rather than separately. And it might be because they're in the same area and something as well. And there might be group goals. One of the things that is important to know is we'll look at 2 models around group development, where we look at how groups actually form, from how they form and what takes place in terms of trying to the arguing that goes on in the ambiguous stage of a group development, to when they actually establish norms about roles and activities, to the performing level, to when they actually complete their task or their project so that they actually adjourn and finish up. We have another model of teams that work, and some of you, and particularly doing some of your class assignments, might even know this, is you get your group together and then nothing happens for a while. There's no performance, and then all of a sudden like a deadline occurs and something, and there's a flurry of activity if you look at the little spiral going up, and people kind of get their job done, and then there's a little bit of performance going on, and then the same thing happens, and they work in sort of spurts. So that's why they call it punctuated equilibrium. Groups are characterized by who leads them, what roles people have, how strongly they unite together, the norms, who has status, how they are structured. Within any group, there's some sort of structure that develops over time. Members tend to have different expertise, different power, different status. It's very hard to sustain sort of a leaderless group over time. Usually someone takes on some kind of a role or a pattern of relationship. There is status in formal groups based on the position that the person has in the formal organization. We have role types that show up in groups. We have, expected roles that they're formal requirements that, I'm the note taker, or I'm the programmer, or I'm the analyst. There's perceived roles that someone thinks they might be the caregiver or the harmonizer. Then there might be enacted roles where they actually, the behavior that the member actually carries out, and that might even be different than expected or perceived. We have group norms that develop in organization, which are standards of behavior that the group members all share for how people do things. It's a little bit more like our organizational culture, but it's done more at a group level. It may be explicit or implicit. It may be written, may be spoken. It might be accepted in varying degrees by members. It may not apply to everybody, and it may develop as a result of different member interaction over time. A good norm for a group is people standing up for the company when it's unfairly criticized, always wanting to improve on what they're doing, making sure that everybody listens to everybody's ideas and seeking those ideas and caring about the people that you work with. When we have ineffective groups, certain norms take over, like taking advantage of people, not doing the quality of work that is expected, a person having their own self-interest in the group, or hiding problems from supervisors because they don't want, there might be consequences associated with it. In leadership in our groups, in formal groups, the leadership can exercise legitimate power, and we'll be talking about that in our power chapter. They can reward and punish group members for behavior and productivity. In informal groups, leadership helps accomplish the group goals. They help people satisfy their needs. They embody the values of that group. They often are tasked with presenting the group's viewpoint to others, and they sustain the group as a functioning unit. When we look at group cohesiveness, we look at what is keeping people involved in that group. What's the force that's pulling them towards the group or away from the group? The closeness or commonness that people have in being involved in that group. There's group cohesion is based on group attraction, that you might have a very charismatic leader, they might have a reputation, it might be small enough to allow for individual members to feel heard. It might be a support group where they help overcome obstacles. There might be a strong degree of compatibility among all of them. You can take a look at this particular chart that looks at when you have low and high organizational goals and achievement, about how performance works in that. When people feel that there's a strong degree of cohesiveness and it matches with agreement on organizational goals, they tend to have higher performance. One of the things that may happen in groups is a phenomenon known as groupthink. And this is actually a deterioration of the efficiency of the group and judgment in the interest of the group solidarity. Groupthink actually results in an idea in the group that they're invulnerable, nobody's going to hurt them. They tend to have their own ideas of what morals are. They feel that everybody's in agreement. There's also a lot of pressure to conform with the group members, that if they don't, there might be some sort of consequences. And when someone sets forth an opposing idea, it's automatically dismissed. We also have another phenomena that well, I don't know if it's a phenomena, but in groups where we have what's called social loafing, that individuals might hold back from contributing to the group's performance because they can kind of tag on to other high-performing team members. This is not an issue in cohesive teams and groups. Everybody carries their load. It happens when individual members can receive neither credit or blame for their performance. So if everybody gets an A and you don't recognize any of the high performance, it's likely you might have a social loafer in your group. In terms of types of teams, usually teams are formed in organization around different functions. Sometimes they're virtual, people being in different places, solving certain problems, creating just teams that are just self-directed and able to do some work on their own. Teams are formed to improve organizational productivity, to provide flexibility, to improve quality, and often to increase customer satisfaction. Teams are formed when any of these kinds of things exist, when there's a complicated problem that requires more diversity of talent to solve it, when they want to improve a product, when there's a division of labor in a task, or if you make the wrong decision, it might be costly, and you might need to have, like 4 heads are better than 1. Before placing employees into teams, you might want to ask these kinds of questions. Can a team do better than an individual? Does the work that's going to be done lend itself to the goals of a team? And can team members still maintain some sort of interdependence? Effective teams need to have top-level commitment. They have to have trust from the management. They have to be willing to take risks. They have to have enough time to get the job done. They have to have the proper training and resources in order to perform effectively. We have different roles going on in teams. Roles tend to be a certain set of behaviors that's expected of people in their positions. Some people have multiple roles and role sets that they perform simultaneously, and people have perceptions of those roles. There could be, again, role conflict, where we saw this a little bit in our individual differences, where people have a role that might violate their own values and attitudes about what they're supposed to do in an organization. If they would like to keep people on a job and they're supposed to identify people to fire as part of a task force team, it might provide a conflict. There's inter-role conflict, where people have difficulty satisfying roles of people that have all different kinds of expectations. And then some people might have multiple roles that conflict with their different expectations. People that are in role conflict have a lot of stress. Their performance is reduced. They have a lot of psychological problems that could also lead to emotional problems and a lot of indecision, and something that needs to be watched carefully in organizational settings.